Welcome to this explainer on America's oldest and, let's be honest, arguably its most chilling historical mystery. I want you to picture this. It's August of 1590. You're sailing toward a dark, storm-battered coastline, right into an untamed world surrounded by dense, shadowy forests and howling wind. That eerie, suspenseful setting is exactly where our journey begins today. We are going to explore the vanishing of the Roanoke colony. It's this massive puzzle that has literally captivated historians, archaeologists, and pretty much anyone who hears about it for over 4 centuries. So dim the lights, settle in, and let's unravel what we actually know about the people who simply faded into the mists of history. We're going to start our story right in the middle of the action, on a very tense, overcast night. Governor John White is finally returning to the Roanoke settlement. Now, it is so incredibly dark that his crew actually overshoots the landing site. But they spot the light of a great fire through the woods, so they drop anchor. Desperate to greet his family and his friends, White has his men sound a trumpet call. They even sing familiar English songs into the dark. But there is only silence. When day finally breaks, they land, they approach the village, and nobody. The settlement is completely, entirely deserted. The only clue they find is a single word carved into a post: Croatoan. The sheer shock of this moment is captured perfectly in Governor White's own journal. He noted this really haunting discovery, writing, "We found the houses taken down and the place very strongly enclosed with a high palisado, and 5 foot from the ground in fair capital letters was graven Croatoan." Think about that for a second. The houses weren't blown over. They weren't burned. They were carefully dismantled, and this towering fort-like wall of great trees had been put up. Yet, there was absolutely zero trace of the over 100 men, women, and children that he had left behind 3 years prior. Okay, let's flash back to 1587, a hopeful beginning. To really understand this tragic end, we have to look at how they started. The stakes were incredibly high when this expedition, which was backed by Sir Walter Raleigh, first set out. They arrived in mid-July of 1587, totally full of hope to build a permanent new life in the New World. And there were bright spots, like the baptism of Virginia Dare. Born just a month after they arrived, she was actually John White's granddaughter, and the very first English child born in the Western Hemisphere. It must have been a moment of profound joy. But it was fleeting. Looming in the background was this growing dread. You see, they were desperately low on provisions, and a really harsh winter was right around the corner. Which leads us to the stranded governor, a 3-year delay. The situation in the colony got so desperate that Governor White had to make a really agonizing decision. He had to sail back to England for supplies, so he leaves his daughter, his newborn granddaughter, and the rest of his people behind in late 1587, fully expecting to be back in just a matter of months. But geopolitical events completely derailed that plan. In 1588, the massive Spanish Armada attacks England. The Anglo-Spanish War erupts, and Queen Elizabeth orders every available ship to stay and defend the homeland. White is trapped. He tries desperately to secure a ship, but he fails at every turn. It takes 3 agonizing years before he can finally secure passage back, culminating in his tragic return in August 1590, which, incredibly sadly, happened to be little Virginia Dare's 3rd birthday. Let's move into the investigation, clues left behind. If we treat this like a historical cold case, we need to look really closely at the physical evidence left at the site. When White explored the area, he noticed something fascinating. The settlement was not violently destroyed. Like we heard in his quote, the houses were taken down. And inside that fort-like enclosure, he found heavy items. We're talking bars of iron, lead pigs, iron shot, just scattered about and heavily overgrown with weeds. It really looked like a calculated, organized departure where they simply couldn't carry their heaviest materials. But, not everything was peaceful. While the sailors searched the area, they found a trench where the colonists had carefully hidden 5 chests. 3 of them actually belonged to John White himself. These chests had been completely dug up, ransacked, and just left exposed to the elements. White's personal books were torn from their covers, his maps and pictures were totally ruined by rain, and his armor was literally eaten through with rust. White actually believed this specific vandalism was the work of hostile Native Americans from nearby Desamonguapeac, who probably watched the colonists leave and then swooped right in to loot whatever was left behind. So here is the absolutely crucial point. The most important clue left behind was a symbol, the Maltese cross. Before White left in 1587, he set up a secret protocol. If the colonists were ever forced to leave the settlement in distress or under attack, they were instructed to carve this specific cross above the name of their destination. White frantically searched the trees and the posts, but as he wrote, he found no such sign of distress. The complete absence of this cross actually gave White a profound sense of hope that they had simply relocated safely.
So that brings us to the cold case theories. What actually happened?
If they weren't in distress, where on earth did they go? Let's objectively lay out the major theories. First up, environmental or external threats. Could a massive hurricane have wiped them out? Or maybe a severe 3-year drought that we know historically hit the region caused widespread famine? Disease was obviously a constant threat back then too. And finally, there's the possibility that the Spanish, who were actively hunting for this English base, found and destroyed them. While all of these are perfectly plausible, they all share one major glaring flaw. White found absolutely 0 graves, no unburied remains, and no signs of a battle or storm destruction. If a catastrophe of that scale happened right there on Roanoke Island, they would have left a very different kind of physical evidence. In modern historiography, historians basically split into 2 prominent camps. Anthropologist Lee Miller argues for political sabotage. She suggests that Queen Elizabeth's Secretary of State, Sir Francis Walsingham, deliberately doomed the colony just to ruin his rival, Sir Walter Raleigh. She posits that the colonists were intentionally stranded, eventually forced to flee, and then taken captive in the native trade network. On the flip side, historian James Horn argues for peaceful assimilation. He believes the colonists, facing starvation due to really poor planning, just did what they had to do to survive. They disbanded and integrated into local, friendly Native American tribes. Both theories are fascinating, and honestly, neither can be entirely proven or disproven. Now, when you look at the geography of the region, it provides a highly likely destination. The original plan for the 1587 expedition was actually never to stay on Roanoke in the first place. They were supposed to travel 50 miles inland, up into the Chesapeake Bay area to establish their colony. A lot of historians believe that once they realized White wasn't coming back quickly, they just executed their original plan. And to back this up, years later, Jamestown settlers actually heard rumors of English people living inland who had recently been killed in a regional conflict. Another highly probable destination is Croatoan, which we know today as Hatteras Island. I mean, this is exactly what the carving on the post suggested, right? Croatoan was the birthplace of Manteo, a Native American ally who lived closely with the colonists. White himself was totally convinced they had gone there, noting he felt greatly joyed because the indigenous people of that island were their friends. Unfortunately, due to a broken cable, lost anchors, and some genuinely terrible storms, White's ships were nearly destroyed, and he was forced to turn back to England before he could ever actually check Croatoan. Now let's look at modern clues, DNA, and some hoaxes. Without John White able to finish his search, the mystery was just left to future generations, which, of course, led to some sensational hoaxes. In 1937, a 21-pound quartz stone was mysteriously discovered, and it was covered in Elizabethan English. It purported to be this desperate message from Eleanor Dare, John White's daughter, describing an Indian attack, the murder of her child, and her flight inland. It completely fooled academics and historians for a few years. It sparked this wild frenzy where dozens more fake stones were suddenly being found, right up until the entire thing was exposed as an elaborate theatrical hoax. But genuine science has given us some really tantalizing new leads recently. In 2011, researchers used X-ray spectroscopy on one of John White's original watercolor maps and found a hidden, patched-over symbol of a fort located 60 miles inland, a place they now call Site X. Subsequent archaeological digs near there and over on Hatteras Island have actually uncovered fragments of 16th century English borderware pottery. The catch? These artifacts could just be trade goods. And while the Lost Colony DNA Project has been busy analyzing historical records and testing local populations to find genetic proof of assimilation, so far, they've come up completely empty. Which leaves us with an unsolved American mystery. This brings us to the pretty sobering reality of this faded historical puzzle. Based on all the clues we've laid out, the dismantled fort, the ransacked chests, the missing cross of distress, and that single cryptic word carved into a post, what really happened to the Lost Colony? Were they the victims of a tragic political conspiracy? Did they succumb to the harsh environment? Or did they just quietly slip into the forest to become one with the indigenous people? The coast of North Carolina still keeps its secrets, leaving us to wonder, what do you think happened in the dark? Did they leave, die, or move elsewhere?